Hi y'all, I'm going to talk about some steps in managing the supply chain, starting with manufacturing flow management. So basically it ensures that the firm and the supply chain have the needed resources to manufacture with flexibility and move products through the production process. So it tries to improve the overall manufacturing output by leveraging the capabilities held by all of the members in the supply chain. So the overall manufacturing output is measured in quality, delivery, speed, and flexibility. So those all are aspects of the entire productivity of the supply chain. And you can either use a lean or an agile strategy. A lean strategy is when the products are built before the demand happens, and then waste management is a priority for that company as they're fulfilling that demand. And then an agile strategy is when you see the demand happen, you fulfill the orders after the demand happens, and waste management isn't as much of a priority as it is in the lean strategy. So supplier relationship management is a lot like CRM. It's really identifying and maintaining the relationships with your suppliers to get really great rates, and that'll increase the cost effectiveness and the productivity and efficiency of the supply chain. That's why Amazon has such great logistics and they're able to do free delivery, because they have really great relationships with all of their suppliers and their logistics partners, so they can afford to do free delivery and still make a good profit. So supplier relationship management is really dependent on the relationships with the suppliers for flexibility. And it provides structural support for developing and maintaining relationships with suppliers. And it's really important to ensure that the manufacturing resources are used to their max potential, which can really help. And all of that has an impact on the company's bottom line, which is making a profit. So all of that is really important. So product development and commercialization is a group of activities that facilitates the joint development and marketing of new products among a group of supply chain partner firms. So you can use a multi-company collaboration to execute new product development, testing, and launch. So the more resources in that supply chain, the better. And it enables a company to introduce features and cost-cutting measures into products that they have already developed and products that they plan to develop in the future. So the capability for developing and introducing these new products quickly and cost efficiently is key for having competitive success against rival firms that are trying to do the same thing. And that all goes back to the relationships that you have with your suppliers that enable companies to release these new products in a quick and cost-effective fashion. So returns management is super important for having another touch point for CRM and customer service and building a brand. So it enables firms to manage volumes of return product efficiently, and it can minimize returns related costs and maximize the value of the returned assets to the firms in the supply chain. So if you handle returns in a really great way, make it really easy for the customer, it's going to create a positive image among the people that are returning products to you. And it's an additional marketing and customer service touch point. So if you have a really great experience with returning a product to said company, you're going to want to be more inclined to recommend it to someone else who need to return something in the future, especially with companies in retail or department stores, or like gift returning. If you're giving someone a gift with a gift receipt, you're more likely to buy a gift for someone at a store that you know has good returns management, other than a store that you have a bad experience with doing returns with them. So this is really important too, especially for y'all Gen Zs, because you love your sustainable companies. Companies are extending their sustainability efforts to their supply chain. So they're really embracing the need for optimizing social and environmental costs in addition to financial costs. So they're trying to be more cost effective and also be more socially responsible by adopting more green practices in their supply chain. So it's really addressing current business needs and long-term initiatives that you can mitigate risks in. So really, bottom line of sustainable supply chain management is lowering costs and acting leaders in protecting the environment to advance their CRM efforts in areas that are normally behind the scenes, like supply chain management. Outsourcing, very important. This is why a lot of Americans say that overseas countries are stealing our jobs, because a ton of companies are outsourcing, or more specifically offshoring, which I will get to in a bit. So outsourcing is basically using an independent third party to manage an entire function of the logistics system. So it could be transportation, it could be storing inventory, it could be distributing to suppliers or distributing to a wholesaler. So it can either be through a third-party logistics company, a 3PL, or a fourth-party logistics company, a 4PL. The main difference between these two is that a 3PL is just the executor. They get a plan from the company they're working with and they execute it. If the company says, send X product to X location, this is our strategy, the 3PL says, okay, we'll do that. A 4PL creates and executes the logistics plan. So it's kind of like a consulting service as well. So they come into a company who asks them for help with creating a logistics plan. They say, you should do this. They say, okay, can you do that? They say yes, and then they go ahead and execute it. So this helps reduce inventories and have stock at fewer plants and distribution centers, but it still provides either the same or better levels of service. And since order fulfillment isn't usually like a core competency of a lot of companies, it's often outsourced to a 3PL or a 4PL. And then many firms are using offshoring or nearshoring for these different competencies. So the differences between offshoring and nearshoring. Offshoring is sending logistics to places typically overseas, specifically with low-cost labor. So places like, I think it's the BRICS countries. I don't remember what all of them stand for, but I know India is one, Bangladesh is another, China is one, and then I know Vietnam is another place that a lot of people do outsourcing to. And then nearshoring is outsourcing to closer locations like Mexico or the Caribbean to have a little bit less risk involved in those activities. Public-private partnerships are basically, you want to think of a government entity and a private sector entity working together to solve a common problem that both of them face. So it's really important to the satisfaction of both the company's interests and larger society's interests. And it has a mechanism by which large-scale problems and opportunities can be addressed in the private sector and the public sector. So it's important to pool those resources of either a government entity and a private entity just to have as much manpower and resources as possible to solve a problem, especially if it's a really big coronavirus. So if a project costs upwards of billions of dollars, it can be shared between taxpayers and businesses in a couple of cities. Electronic distribution, this one's fun. So basically, it's just any product or service that can be distributed electronically. So that can be through traditional forms, like when you get cable, or through satellite transmission, or electronic signals. So for this, think of just any online product that isn't a physical product, like a software or a website that you pay for premium access, or any kind of online subscription service like a Netflix, a Disney Plus, or like a magazine or a newspaper that you have a paid subscription to for their online services and not the physical paper. So 3D printing is a different kind of electronic distribution, I'll read the whole definition because my face is covering part of it. So it's the creation of three-dimensional objects through an additive manufacturing printing technology that layers raw materials into desired shapes, is that last word. So it's definitely an up-and-coming method of electronic distribution, and you'll probably see an increase in its popularity over the next coming years. So a couple benefits of 3D printing is smaller, more localized supply chains will become the norm. So people will have to do less travel for logistics services, probably less carbon emissions into the atmosphere from those decreased amount of large travel that companies would have to do for their logistics supply chain. And smaller manufacturers can produce a lot more custom products for short lead times, which is really important for things like mass customization. And then, like I mentioned a little bit, 3D printing removes the need for transportation of goods to distribution centers and retailers. So you can already have it and distribute it yourself, and you don't have to outsource that step of your logistics process. And it can also, like I said, create a positive impact on businesses' carbon footprint and the environment at large by having less travel to transport their products. And then, all right, globalizing a supply chain. If you have increasing demand for imported products worldwide, you would probably globalize your supply chain. There's a main reason why a lot of companies do it is the cheaper labor in more developing countries. And then you can get past trade barriers and tariffs if you're manufacturing and having your logistics in a different country, and you don't have to export it. You can get past those trade barriers and tariffs. You can expose yourself to new technologies that other countries are using in their technology processes, and you can also create more competition to domestic suppliers, which helps the economy as a whole. And then you can build up your brand equity in a different place that your company isn't located already. Okay, so we're talking about big data. That's fun. Okay, so supply chain analytics and technology basically helps interpret big data and improving supply chain operations. So since more powerful computers have been developed in the last couple of years, it gives more opportunity for suppliers to collect more data, and they put that into the cloud. So cloud computing, basically it's using remote networks to store, manage, and process data. And it's really useful for collaborating on big data projects where the amount of data is so large that it's hard to transmit electronically over like email or any other forms of distribution. So you can just access the cloud, work on those projects within your company or within a different company. So it's also good for quickly and cost effectively analyzing those findings. So something that's gaining more popularity is sensory equipment that connects physical objects to decision-making analytics. Okay, so a marketing channel basically acts as the distribution function of the marketing mix within a supply chain. So it's how products, ownership, communication, financing, and risk get from the company to the customer. So it has all of these interdependent organizations in the process, and it's basically the route for products and services to flow to the customer. So it's everything that's involved. It's the 3PL doing the logistics. It's the credit card company that the customer uses to pay for the product. It's the advertising agency that makes the ad by which the customer hears about it. It's how the customer finds out about it, gets it, pays for it, and maybe returns it. So, yeah, said that. And then channel members are basically the organizations that are involved, and the expertise of all of those channel members enhances the overall performance of the channel. So they negotiate with each other, buy and sell products, and facilitate the change of ownership between the buyer and seller while moving the product from the manufacturer to the final consumer. So they facilitate the distribution. So all of the members of the marketing channel facilitate the distribution by having specialization and division of labor to best perform each of the tasks that are required. And they can provide a lot of contact efficiencies by having great communication with one another, and they create time, place, form, and exchange utility, which I will get into on this slide. So form utility is elements of the composition and appearance of a product that make it desirable. In other words, it's basically when channel members are transforming raw materials into consumable products. So taking wood and making it into a desk creates form utility. And then time utility is increasing customer satisfaction gain by making a good or service available at the right time. Place utility is the same thing, except with place. So time and place utility are basically created by the physical movement of the product throughout the supply chain system at the right time and at the right place for its desired consumer. And then exchange utility is the increased value of the product that's created as its ownership is transferred. That's what's cut off. And basically that's created by swapping the product for money. So liquidating it, really. And that is my section. I will hand it back over to Sicker.